Your Majesties, distinguished guests, students, faculty of Rice University, this is truly a special event, made even more special by the fact that on January 6th I received a letter from His Majesty, King Abdullah, saying, "I deeply regret the fact that I was unable to speak at your distinguished institute on September 12th, as had been scheduled, especially so as it was a direct result of the atrocious act of terror that took place on that day, one which shook the entire world and whose repercussions will be felt for a long time to come. The road to peace is long and laborious, but I think that now more than ever before is the time to work hand in hand with the utmost determination and resilience to bring peace between conflicting parties. I look forward to coming to the Baker Institute." Your Majesty, thank you very much for keeping your word. As we well know, you are a man truly of your word. I just have two administrative announcements to make. We will be taking written questions from the audience. Our Rice student ambassadors will be collecting them from you during the course of the program, and we will then pose those questions to His Majesty, who has so graciously agreed to respond to questions. I would like to ask the audience to please remain seated until their Majesties and the official party has departed from Studi at the end of the program. Now it's my true pleasure to invite to the podium the President of Rice University, Dr. Malcolm Gillis. Malcolm.
Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Good afternoon. Welcome to Rice. We are immensely pleased to host this afternoon's distinguished guests, His Majesty Queen Abdullah bin al-Hussein of Jordan and Queen Rania al-Abdullah. It is particularly fitting that His Majesty, who has strongly emphasized information technology in Jordan, will be broadcast this afternoon over the World Wide Web. Today's event exemplifies Rice's commitments to programs that address important national and international issues. The James A. Baker III Institute for Public Policy plays a leading role in this process. The Institute has drawn together eminent statesmen, creative scholars, and energetic students from around the world since it was founded in 1994. Through conferences, symposia, and lectures, it has forged new links between the worlds of ideas and the world of action. It is my great honor to introduce the Institute's namesake and honorary chair, Secretary James A. Baker III. Most of you know, who are Houstonians, that Rice has had a long and very fruitful history with the Baker family. Secretary Baker's grandfather, Captain James A. Baker, was a founding member of Rice's board and twice, not once but twice, saved our original endowment. For over 50 years, his vision and his steady hand, which we would later see in his grandson, have helped set Rice on the path to becoming a university of national and now international prominence. James A. Baker III has built on his grandfather's legacy in a distinguished career to Rice, to the nation, and to the world. A native Houstonian, he is a graduate of Princeton and the University of Texas School of Law. In 1975, the first of three presidents drew on Secretary Baker's talents when Gerald Ford selected him as Undersecretary of Commerce. Those of you who recall those years following the 1973 oil crisis can appreciate the confidence that reflected. And that pattern was to be repeated again and again as our nation's leaders called upon him to serve at important moments in our nation's history. In 1981, President Reagan appointed him White House Chief of Staff, and then in 1985 as the 67th Secretary of the Treasury. And then in January 1989, President George H. Bush asked him to become the nation's 61st Secretary of State. His steady and firm hand was evident in dealing with momentous events that occurred on his watch, from war in the Middle East to the implosion of communism. He was a prime architect of the 1991 Madrid Conference, where Israel entered face-to-face negotiations with many of its neighbors for the first time. He traveled to 90 countries abroad and built enduring new links to the former communist states before stepping down in August of 1992. Secretary Baker has been honored with many of our country's highest awards for public service, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Department of Treasury's Alexander Hamilton Award, and the Department of State's Distinguished Service Award. So please join me in once again welcoming Secretary James A. Baker III, who will introduce our distinguished guests.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Malcolm. Ladies and gentlemen, I take really special pride today in introducing our speaker. His presence here is a truly great honor for the Baker Institute. It is a truly great honor for Rice University and indeed for Houston, Texas. And like everyone here, I look forward keenly to his remarks. He comes to us having met for some time yesterday with President Bush in Washington. And I am looking forward keenly to those remarks, but I am sure that our speaker will forgive me if I begin his introduction with a mention of his late and much-loved father, King Hussein. Long after my own diplomatic duties had ended, and really when it no longer mattered at all in any official sense, King Hussein opened his heart to Susan and to me, and we to him. We visited often whenever we could, and we talked often by telephone. In fact, I remember on occasion talking about our sons, his Abdullah, our speaker today, and my Doug, who were classmates in school in Massachusetts. King Hussein's last act of devotion to his country, in fact, was to appoint Abdullah as crown prince, a young man then little known to the world at large. But, as his father certainly understood, he was also a young man extraordinarily well prepared for the challenges and the opportunities that lay ahead. Today, after less than just 4 years on the throne, he is well known, he is justifiably well known to the world at large. His father's faith in him has, in that short period of time, been fully justified. Domestically, he has started processes of reform that are designed to improve the Jordanian economy and which are, in fact, improving the Jordanian economy with roughly 5% growth in GDP recently. Processes that will bring his country more squarely into the global economy. To further this process, last year he signed a free trade agreement with the United States of America. He and Queen Rania, who also graces us with her presence here today, have brought a spirit of life and a spirit of joy to their kingdom. He has been no less impressive in the international arena. Like his father, he is a steadfast and true friend of the United States of America. In the immediate aftermath of the terrible attacks of last September, he was quick not just to offer heartfelt sympathy to the American people, but to join Washington without any reservation whatsoever in the worldwide effort to combat the scourge of terrorism. And like his father, he is an ardent advocate for peace in the Middle East. As everyone here today knows, a just and lasting peace between Arabs and Israelis remains very elusive. Indeed, recent months have seen a sickening and dangerous escalation of violence. But throughout this difficult period, our speaker has been a constant voice for human decency and political moderation. He and Queen Rania were our gracious hosts at a conference on forgiveness and reconciliation in Amman just a year and a half ago at the turn of the millennium. It is very important that his voice be heard in the critical months ahead, and his voice will be heard. But progress, of course, will not be easy. And obviously, the United States itself must play its indispensable part, as it has for a quarter of a century under both Democratic and Republican administrations. But it's also going to require courage, and it's going to require wisdom by regional leaders if the promise of lasting peace is to become a reality for the people of the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, I am absolutely convinced that today's speaker will provide that much-needed courage and that much-needed wisdom. My friends, it's a privilege to present to you His Majesty Abdullah II, the fourth king of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Your Majesty.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Secretary Baker, Ambassador Jordan, friends, thank you for your kind welcome. It is a privilege to join you today at the Baker Institute. Like its namesake, this institute has earned a global reputation for not only great ideas, but also public service. And I am delighted to be invited to share in your work today. I'm especially honored that we are joined today by leaders who have always been great friends of the Middle East. Secretary Baker and Ambassador Jordan have long understood our region's critical world, in a world that have allowed them to work closely with my late father to advance the cause of peace and development. And I do look forward to many, many years of their wisdom and support. Our discussion today is, as was pointed out, in fact, a catch-up session. Last September 11th, I was actually on an aircraft on my way here to speak when I got the first news about the World Trade Center attacks. Our meetings, like so many others, was postponed. But I think the fact that we are together today, continuing our dialogue, tells a story about what our nations have achieved in the last 6 months. As many have observed, the terrible events of September 11th opened a new chapter in history. But equally clearly, it was not the chapter that terrorists planned to write. Instead of falling into chaos and demoralization, the international community pulled together. The result was a new global alliance against terrorism and all it stands for. And I'm proud to say that Jordanians have played an active role on the side of justice and peace. And that is a role that is completely in accord with our Islamic heritage and our Arab desire for freedom, as well as our national history. For decades, Jordan itself has faced significant terrorist threats. I and other Jordanians have spoken publicly and repeatedly against extremism. In the worldwide fight against terror, our country, thankfully, came early, and we're still beside you today. But now we need to stand together to resolve another serious threat to world peace, a crisis that puts the Middle East at ground zero and demands of all of us an urgent response. Last September, when I was scheduled to be here, Israel and Palestine were deeply trapped in violence. On both sides, despair and cynicism were hardening. The chain of action and reaction threatened the future not only of the Palestinians and Israelis, but of the entire region, a region that is part of the economic, political, and indeed the spiritual lives of people around the world. Since then, the situation in the Middle East has become even more grave. Today, we stand on the knife's edge, and the dangers is not only to the region, but to the world. The violence, confrontation, occupation that we have recently witnessed tells us plainly the Middle East needs a new approach to peace. The incremental negotiating model in which parties gradually build confidence and slowly move towards an undefined outcome, I believe that this model has run its course. To say this is not to diminish the importance of the advances we have made in the past few decades. The Madrid conference, spurred by the direct personal leadership of President Bush and Secretary Baker, did set the standards for results. Palestinians attended in a joint delegation with Jordan, and discussions began on vital, practical concerns. The Oslo process that followed bridged the gaps, broke taboos, and made gains. And as recently as last year's Mitchell Commission report and the Tenet ceasefire agreement, leaders across the region were expressing a strong, shared desire to break the impasse and move forward. But ultimately, for the Middle East peace process to achieve lasting peace, for Palestinians and Israelis to invest their lives, energies, and trust, the people on the ground need to see results, real security, viable independence, and a future of hope. And today, no one can dispute that this hope has been sharply eroded. In its place, misguided perceptions have grown on both sides. That suicide bombings are a productive road to freedom, for instance, or the equally mistaken idea that tanks can subdue a legitimate popular cry for independence. How do we get back on track? Well, today I believe we need less process and more peace. A peace that resonates with both Israelis and Palestinians, credibly addressing their fears, concerns, and hopes. A peace that is independent of the wills of leaders. A peace that once again focuses on timely, practical results. Now, skeptics might argue that this is not possible given the hardening that has emerged in public opinion on both sides. But to these I respond that if today's crisis has made the divisions deeper, it has also made the issues clearer than ever before. Indeed, even while the conflict rages on, there is an internalization process in the minds of people on both sides of the proposed solutions to these thorny issues. But I have to say that both peoples are exhausted, and they are ready for peace, a peace that will allow an Israeli mother to send her child on an errand to a local supermarket without fear, a peace that will allow a Palestinian mother to deliver her newborn alive at a hospital and not at an Israeli roadblock. To end today's violence, conflict resolution must replace conflict management. This requires an approach that focuses sharply on the ultimate goals and principles of peace, as well as a strong, timely, and effective international leadership to bring that resolution about. The fact is that given the present conditions, neither Israelis nor Palestinians are capable of taking the steps needed to reach a reasonable final compromise. Only the international community, under strong American leadership, can guide the parties across the divide. For its part, Jordan has reached out over many years to take the risk from making peace and attempting to sustain it. Our country has a significant stake in peace. We have a tradition of leadership as a stable, moderating force within the region. We have direct interests in major aspects of the negotiations, such as defending the right of return and compensation for Palestinian refugees on Jordanian soil. And we also have other concerns. Although Jordan succeeded in achieving 4.2% real growth in GDP last year, compared to 2.1% in the neighboring countries, experts tell us that the region and the situation costs us at least 1% per year in real growth. And that drain impacts on a whole range of national priorities, from making sure families get food on the table, to building our technological infrastructure, to giving our children the education they need to succeed. Let me be clear. We will never see a truly stable, prosperous Middle East until the Arab-Israeli conflict, and in particular, the Palestinian-Israeli situation, is solved. So towards this goal, we have taken the risk for peace, but we really can't stand alone. It is our collective responsibility to unite against those who don't want peace to prevail. So today I call upon the United States to seize this historic moment, to create a new peace alliance for the Middle East. Under its umbrella, the US-led coalition of European, Arab, and other countries will provide the support that is needed, security, economic, and political, by both Israelis and Palestinians. The parties must be told in no uncertain terms that while suicide bombings will not be rewarded, neither will occupation. Most important, the peace alliance would bring its clout to the bargaining tables, brokering a comprehensive, fair, and lasting deal. That deal must aim for the finish line, not the halfway markers, not the rules for pit stops. It should protect the core interests of each side without breaching their concerns. It should be based on clear, credible principles of justice. And we must ensure that any mechanism that is adopted not only relaunches negotiations on final status issues, but more important, completes them within a reasonable time frame. This mechanism must translate the visions articulated in Madrid, Kentucky, and Beirut, and the United Nations, and the White House into a detailed timeline, a plan of action that would rekindle hope and make it reality. And I really do believe that a strong basis for such a deal was articulated at the recent precedent-setting Arab summit in Beirut. There, Arab states articulated a vision for peace that explicitly recognizes the interests of Israel, while at the same time fulfilling the hopes of Palestinians. Through a collective peace treaty, every Arab state would look at Israel, and Israel would receive the security guarantees it needs. The Jewish character, security, legitimacy, international recognition, Arab acceptance, and peaceful future of Israel would be positively addressed. But at the same time, Arab states would have their core requirements met. An end to the Israeli occupation of all Arab lands, the guarantee of independence, freedom, dignity, equality, and security for the Palestinians, and an agreed solution to the refugee question. I believe this kind of fair deal could stick. Both Israel and Palestine would be assured of their viability, security, and territorial integrity. The Jerusalem question would be answered by providing for a shared open city to all faiths. There would have to be an agreed solution to the refugee problem that is fair to the Palestinians and that does not threaten the sovereignty of the Israeli state. And the international backing under US leadership would provide the level of trust that a fragile new peace would require. Friends, more than 7 years ago, my late father, His Majesty King Hussein, concluded a treaty of peace with Israel, establishing normal relations between our two countries. Now, for the first time, all Arabs have directly addressed Israeli citizens as neighbors who deserve to live in dignity, security, and peace. We told Israelis at the Arab Summit in plain language, we want to permanently welcome you in our neighborhood. Look at the Arab peace proposal seriously, for the sake of the present and for the future of all our peoples. And I really do believe that many Israelis are listening. Despite the difficult situation, this initiative has been endorsed by over 55% of the Israeli public and has won worldwide international support. But success will require more. It will require American leadership. Only the United States has the political and moral authority to bring people together to take the risks that peace requires. In the Middle East, an active US role is indispensable, not only to guide the Palestinians and the Israelis out of conflict, but also to protect your own vital interests and those of your moderate allies who are the bulwark against extremism in our region and around the world. And so I ask the American people, all the American people, to give this proposal a chance. Far too much is at stake to go on as we are. The wake-up alarm has rung. We must not set the clock back, but instead rise and seize the day. Mr. Secretary, just over 10 years ago at Madrid, you reminded participants that negotiations do not guarantee peace, but without negotiations, there is no way to produce genuine peace, and no mechanism to develop understandings that can endure. Well, today, peace demands new approaches and new mechanisms. But our overarching goal remains the same: peace, freedom, and opportunity for all human beings. This is a mission that is at the heart of the American enterprise. And today, more than ever, the world looks to the United States to lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Majesty. That a very eloquent statement. I have many questions, Your Majesty, on the major topic of your presentation. And one is a reference to a new public opinion poll in Israel by the Dahaf Institute, which shows that a majority of Israelis polled just in the last week that 63% do not believe that the terror problem can be solved without negotiations. 59% said they would support a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians with American guarantees, to include a withdrawal to the 67 lines, the evacuation of most settlements, a compromise in Jerusalem, and a Palestinian renunciation of the right of return as amended. An even larger majority, 67%, believe that an IDF withdrawal from the territories and redeployment on the Green Line would give rise to hope to the Israeli public. The question is that if this is the opinion of the public, is the public way ahead of its leaderships in the Arab-Israeli equation on peace?
Thank you very much. So actually, this is what we've been saying for several months now, that leaders are going to remember that the reason they're there is actually to look after the interests of their peoples. And in this particular situation, I put it to you that, setting the poll aside, that if you were to ask the Israelis and Palestinians how they feel, I think all of them would say enough is enough. For God's sake, get us out of this particular crisis. And if the leaders don't understand that, maybe we should reach out to the people. It is them that are paying the price at the end of the day. As I said, that we have the ingredients to move the process forward. There is an Arab agenda proposal that reaches really to 100% of what the Israelis have been wanting for so many decades. But at the same time, we have to give hope to the Palestinians. And so I think if you reach to the Israeli public and to the Palestinian public, and the Arab in particular also, to say to the Israelis, look, once and for all, you can live in their neighborhood, free of fear, to be able to have a prosperous future, I think they'd go for it. If you go to the Palestinians and say, once and for all, you will be able to control your lives and to be able to build a future for you and your children, and I think that human beings being human beings will all rally for that. So if we do have obstacles in the several coming weeks, I think that that message of peace and prosperity and hope to Israelis and Palestinians should be directed to the people, and I hope that the leaders will listen.
Thank you. In any final settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict on the Israeli-Palestinian side, there is much attention paid to the issue of Palestinian refugees and the issue of Jerusalem. How confident are you, Your Majesty, that these two very difficult issues can be resolved through negotiations?
Well, we have to remind everybody that in Taba 3 years ago, Israelis and Palestinians came very close to solving that situation. And I would suggest that once Israelis and Palestinians hopefully soon come back to the negotiation table, that we start where we left off at Taba as opposed to going straight back to the drawing board. We in Arab countries have, to make the ability flexible for us to achieve this aim, have done in our charter at Beirut to say an agreed solution to the Palestinian problem. And I believe that the basis for Jerusalem was also articulated at Taba. It just needs a bit more work.
Excellent. There's also a great deal of interest in several questions on Iraq and U.S. policy toward Iraq, and two approaches through the United Nations Security Council on so-called smart sanctions, and also on returning the UN inspectors on weapons of mass destruction. The other approach that is being advocated in certain parts of Washington are a military action against Iraq. What is your opinion on this, Your Majesty?
Well, again, you know, we all learned so much of the way His late Majesty King Hussein used to approach things, and he always advocated dialogue and exchange to give people a chance to be able to solve their problems away from violence. In particular, at this time, if anybody has any sensitivity to what is going on in the Middle East and what is happening between Israelis and Palestinians, the anger and the frustration that Israelis, Palestinians, and Arabs are facing at the moment, that I don't think you'd even want to raise the question of Iraq at the moment. And I think there has to be some understanding for what people are going through on the ground at this stage.
In any comprehensive peace, the issues of Syria and Lebanon will have to be addressed. Do you think that this could move forward at the same time that there would be negotiations, if there are, on the Israeli-Palestinian side, and that negotiations could proceed according to the Madrid formula on the Syrian and Lebanese sides?
Well, I think this is what we need to articulate with the American administration and with the regional players over the next couple of weeks, a vision of basically having an umbrella, which, again, we're both Secretary and I are concerned about using Madrid as a name that might frighten people in the wrong direction, but a Madrid-type formula where you have actually two tracks. You have the Israeli-Palestinian track, and you have the Arab-Israeli track, which I articulated just recently. If we can have these two moving under an umbrella, I think this is the way to move the process forward. If you link both tracks together, then you give excuses to individuals to sort of get the wooden spoon out or to create obstacles. So under one umbrella, as happened in Madrid beforehand, two tracks to be able to move forward is probably the solution that would be most successful.
Your Majesty, I don't know if I should address this to you or to Her Majesty. It has sometimes been said that the greatest underutilized resource of the Arab world is its women. What are your plans for providing opportunities for the women of Jordan?
I'll take this one, I guess. I'll just relax. Well, we are a population of just 5 million, and if you want to compete in the global economy, you have to utilize all the resources that you have. We have to remind everybody in the world that 75%, almost 75% of the Arab world is under the age of 29. And we have to address their hopes and aspirations, men and women. And if we're going to move into a global society where everybody has a fair chance, we have to open the doors for everybody to have equal opportunity. Now, what we're trying to do in Jordan, for example, there's always been an argument of those that have and those that have not. How do you bridge the digital divide, the welfare between those that are rich and those that are poor? Well, those that are less capable than others financially doesn't mean that they're less intelligent than those that have the capability. The only way you're going to bridge that divide is through education, give everybody a fair chance. What we're trying to do in Jordan, and we hope to complete in the next 18 months, that English is taught in grade 1, computer skill is available to everybody starting from grade 2. So we would have in 12 years a completely English and computer literate society, men and women. And actually, we've started in the community centers, these little IT centers to try and propel local communities until the school system, the government projects catch up with the project over 18 months. Those that have been most successful at adapting to computer capability in English have been women in the rural areas. And it's been a tremendous surprise, a positive encouragement to us. Women have a tremendous role to play in the Middle East, but we as governments have got to give them a chance at a fair shot at it. Education really is the equalizer.
Jordan, Your Majesty, is only one of 4 countries with which the United States has a free trade association agreement. Jordan is now exporting $300 million worth of goods to the United States. How do you see the evolution and the development of U.S.-Jordanian economic commercial relations?
Well, sir, I think we're just at the start of it. We were down to maybe $40 million worth of trade 2 years ago. So in 24 months, we went from 30, 40 million up to 300 plus. And I believe 18 months from our statistics, that is doubling. So the future gives us a great prospect, and I think it's an example to others in the area. If they see us moving on getting a modern approach to society and to trade, to bringing down unemployment, the reason why it's so important for Jordan to succeed, because if we set the standard, I think we can encourage a lot of other people, especially the younger generation of leaders, if not leaders, the second and third level to be able to move in the same direction that we are. If you're going to compete in a global society, the guy that gets the first step in the right direction will leave everybody behind by a tremendous distance. And I think that's beginning to dawn on people in our part of the world. What's fortunate to Jordan, if you're going to compete in global society, small countries can move faster. So small is good at this time in our lives in moving economies forward. But we are trying to send a message to other countries in our region that the train is leaving the station. And as we set the standard in Jordan, even on education, as I just explained, a lot of countries are sort of getting in touch with us and saying, what is it that you're doing? I mean, there is an interest, because if we can prove success, I think that the Middle East will be a better place off in the next coming years.
Thank you. The last question, Your Majesty, from a Rice student. I realize that you have extensive experience racing cars, diving, parachuting, etc. I don't know what the etc. means, but have you tried American football? It's all those other sports combined and more. P.S. We can arrange for a game between you and your bodyguards versus a Rice Chamister team immediately after this event.
I think the problem is not here, it's probably with the Secret Service at this stage. But when I spent 8 years in junior high school and high school in the States, and I didn't take American football as a sport, but obviously as teenagers do, we always, on the weekends, used to get the football out. But I was a better soccer player than I was a football player. But it's a sport that I've always enjoyed. Maybe it's sort of embarrassing to admit now, but I've always been a Redskin fan, unfortunately. They've sort of let the side down over the past decade, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they'll come back.
Thank you very much, Your Majesty.